Close your eyes right now. Not for a meditation app, not for a guided breathing exercise. Just close them and count to 10. Notice what happens at the edges of your vision first. That fading bruised purple color, then the deeper black underneath it. Now imagine holding that for 3 full minutes. Not blinking it away, not peeking, just sitting in it. You'd assume nothing is happening. Your brain would tell you this is dead time, a gap between tasks, the visual equivalent of an empty waiting room. But right now, in the back of your eyes, a switch is being thrown, and that switch doesn't control your vision. It controls the diameter of your blood vessels. Here's the part almost nobody knows. Your eyes are not just cameras. They're not simply collecting light so your brain can build a picture of the world. Buried in your retina is a second system, older than vision itself, that does something stranger. It measures the total amount of light hitting your eyes, moment to moment, and uses that measurement to set the tension in the walls of your blood vessels. Bright light, your vessels stay slightly clenched. Total darkness, they let go. You have been walking around for your entire life with a built-in dimmer switch for your circulatory system, and you've never once been told it exists. Think about what that means for a second. Every fluorescent light, every phone screen, every streetlight outside your window at 2 a.m., all of it has been quietly keeping your blood vessels in a low-grade brace position. Not dramatically, not enough to notice, but constantly. You've never experienced what your vascular system does when that signal disappears completely, because in the modern world it almost never does. Even when you relax on the couch with the lights off and the TV on, that screen glare is still feeding your eyes a light signal, and your vessels are still holding their tension, waiting. So what actually happens when the light truly goes to zero? Let's follow it from the very beginning, the way a detective would follow a single thread back to its source. The thread starts with a kind of cell in your retina that has nothing to do with seeing images. These cells don't care about shapes or colors or faces. Their only job is to ask one question continuously. How much light is hitting me right now? And they report that answer directly to a part of your brain that controls your autonomic nervous system. The system running your heart rate, your blood pressure, your digestion, all the stuff you never consciously think about. When light is present, even dim light, these cells send a steady signal that essentially tells your nervous system, stay alert, stay slightly tensed, the environment is active. Your blood vessels respond to this signal the way a muscle responds to a long, low-level isometric hold. Not a hard squeeze, but a persistent low-grade tightness you stop noticing because it never stops. Now take the light away completely. Not dimmed, gone. The signal these cells send doesn't fade gently, it drops out almost immediately. And your nervous system interprets the sudden absence of that signal as something very specific. The all clear. The environment is safe. There's nothing to track, nothing to respond to, nothing demanding readiness. And the very first place that all clear message gets delivered is the smooth muscle wrapped around your smallest blood vessels. Here's where it gets almost mechanical in the best way. That smooth muscle has been holding a slight, constant contraction. Think of a coiled spring under light tension, or a hose that's been given a half-turn more than it needs. When the all-clear signal arrives, that muscle doesn't fight it or resist it. It just stops contracting, it releases. And when it releases, the vessel widens. Not dramatically, not all at once, but steadily over the course of about 3 minutes, your smallest blood vessels, the ones in your fingers, your toes, your skin, begin to open. You can actually feel this happen. Has this ever happened to you? You're lying in bed, lights off, and a minute or two in, your hands and feet suddenly feel warmer. You probably chalked it up to blankets or your body settling down. But that warmth is the heat dump. As your peripheral vessels widen, blood that was being held tightly in your core gets redirected outward, toward your skin, carrying warmth with it. That's not a coincidence, and it's not just relaxing. That's your vascular system physically reorganizing itself in real time, and you can feel it happening on the surface of your own skin. But the vessel widening is only half of what's going on. There's a second process happening at the same time, at a much smaller scale, inside the walls of the blood vessels themselves. The inner lining of every blood vessel in your body is made of a single layer of cells called the endothelium. And these cells are constantly producing a molecule that acts like a chemical open signal for blood vessels, nitric oxide. Under normal daytime conditions, with light constantly present, this production runs at a baseline rate. But in total darkness, that production ramps up. More of this molecule gets released, and it diffuses directly into the smooth muscle we just talked about, reinforcing the relaxation, making the widening deeper and more complete. Why does this matter beyond just feeling cozy? Because the width of a blood vessel determines something physicists call shear stress, the amount of friction the moving blood exerts against the vessel wall as it flows past. Picture water moving through a narrow pipe versus a wide one at the same flow rate. In the narrow pipe, the water scrapes against the walls with much more force. Your arteries experience the same thing, constantly, every day, at a level low enough that you'd never notice, but high enough, over years, to slowly wear on the delicate lining of those vessels. When your vessels widen during those 3 minutes of darkness, that friction drops. The constant low-grade wear and tear, even just for a few minutes, eases off. Your vessel walls get a break. And there's a third thing happening that almost nobody connects to any of this. You've probably heard that darkness triggers melatonin, and that melatonin helps you sleep. That's true, but it's the smaller part of the story. The same chemical pathway that eventually leads to sleep also starts producing melatonin's precursor molecules almost immediately when light disappears, within minutes, not hours. And these molecules aren't just sleep signals. They're potent antioxidants, meaning they actively neutralize some of the cellular damage caused by, among other things, that shear stress we just talked about. So in those same 3 minutes, your body isn't just opening up your vessels and reducing friction, it's also releasing a chemical that helps repair the damage friction causes. Two processes working in the same direction on the same timeline, and almost nobody knows either one is happening. So here's where all three threads come together. Light removal triggers a nervous system all clear that relaxes vessel walls. That relaxation is reinforced chemically by a surge in your vessel lining's own dilating molecule. And at the same time, your body starts producing an antioxidant that helps repair the very friction damage those vessels experience every single day under normal lighting conditions. None of this requires you to fall asleep. None of it requires special equipment, supplements, or technique. It requires exactly one thing: the complete absence of light for about 3 minutes while you're awake. And that's the part that should genuinely surprise you. We talk about meditation, breathwork, cold exposure, all useful tools, all requiring some degree of effort or technique to get right. But there's a tool sitting in plain sight that requires you to do less than almost anything else you could try. Sit in a closet, put on a sleep mask, turn off every light in a room and close the door. 3 minutes, that's the entire protocol. Your vascular system does the rest automatically, the same way it's been doing it for every human who ever lived before electric light existed. Except now, most of us never give it the chance. Let's go back to that cell we mentioned earlier, the one in your retina that doesn't care about images. Give it a name, the ganglion cell, and specifically a rare type that contains a light-sensitive pigment called melanopsin. There are only about 1 million of these cells in each eye, compared to the roughly 100 million photoreceptors doing the actual work of vision. But what they lack in numbers, they make up for in reach. These cells don't send their signals to the part of your brain that builds pictures. They send their signals to a cluster of neurons about the size of a grain of rice, sitting deep in your hypothalamus, that functions as your body's master clock. This is the switchboard. And like any switchboard, its job isn't to interpret the content of the call, it's to route it. The melanopsin cells aren't asking, "What am I looking at?" They're asking one question continuously, second by second: how much total light is hitting me right now? And whatever answer comes back gets routed almost instantly to a part of your nervous system you've never consciously operated in your life: sympathetic nervous system, the one responsible for that low-grade stay-ready tension running through your body at all times. Here's the part that should reframe everything you think you know about light. You'd assume that in bright conditions, this switchboard is firing constantly, sending a flood of signals down to your nervous system. And in a sense, that's true. But the switchboard doesn't go quiet in the dark. It does something stranger. It changes its rhythm. And that rhythm change is the actual throttle, not a simple on-off switch, but something more like a dimmer dial connected directly to the tension in your blood vessel walls. Bright light. Dial turned up, sympathetic tone elevated, vessels held slightly tight. No light, dial turned down, sympathetic tone drops, vessels begin to release. You have been carrying this dial around in your eyes for your entire life, completely unaware that every fluorescent ceiling light, Every phone screen at 1 a.m., every porch light through your bedroom curtains has had its hand resting on it. Now, you might expect that when this dial gets turned all the way down, true total darkness, the cells responsible for it simply switch off. Power down. Go quiet, the way a room goes quiet when you flip a light switch. This is where the second part of the story gets genuinely strange, and it's something most people, including most people who've spent a lifetime under fluorescent lighting, have never heard. In total darkness, your photoreceptors don't go quiet, they get louder. This is called the dark current, and it's one of those facts about the human body that sounds backwards until you understand the mechanism, and then it makes perfect sense. Here's the setup. In the dark, the photoreceptor cells in your retina are actively pumping charged particles across their membranes, continuously, using energy, creating a steady electrical current. This is their resting state, their default, their baseline hum. When light hits them, that current gets interrupted. The cells respond to light by reducing this flow, not by starting one up. In other words, darkness isn't the absence of activity in your eyes. Darkness is the activity. Light is what shuts it down. Think about how upside down that is from how we normally talk about it. We say things like, my eyes are resting when it's dark, the same way we'd say a muscle is resting when it's not flexed. But your photoreceptors in total darkness are working harder, metabolically, than they are in bright light. They're burning through energy at a higher steady rate, maintaining that current, keeping that hum going. And that hum is exactly what gets reported to your master clock as the signal. It's dark, we're safe, stand down. This is the part that should genuinely surprise you, because it means the safety signal your nervous system relies on to relax your blood vessels isn't a lack of activity. It's a different kind of activity, a specific metabolically active, energy-consuming state that your eyes have been built to maintain, generation after generation, going back to long before any human ever lived under artificial light. And in the modern world, this state almost never gets triggered, because almost none of us ever experience true total darkness while awake. We dim the lights, we close our eyes, we pull down the blinds. But the dark current, this real signal, requires the real thing, 0 photons sustained, for long enough that your master clock has time to register it and respond. So let's say it does register. The dial gets turned down, the dark current kicks in, and the safety signal arrives at your nervous system. What happens next physically inside your body? This is where we get to the hose. Picture a garden hose that's had a slight half-twist put into it. Not enough to stop the water, but enough to create resistance, to make the water push harder than it needs to just to get through. That twist is being held in place by a chemical called noradrenaline, a stress hormone that your sympathetic nervous system releases continuously, even at low levels, to keep your blood vessels in that slightly tense state we've been describing. Under normal lighting, this release never fully stops. It just keeps trickling out, keeping that twist in place, hour after hour, day after day, without you ever feeling it as stress in any way you'd recognize. When the safety signal arrives, when your master clock registers true darkness, one of the very first things it does is tell your sympathetic nervous system to ease off. And the most immediate, most measurable result of that is a drop in noradrenaline release. The chemical that's been holding the twist in your hose simply stops being supplied at the same rate. And here's the thing about a twisted hose. It doesn't need to be forced open. It just needs the twisting force to stop. The moment it does, the hose untwists itself because that's its natural, relaxed state. The tension was the unusual condition. Release is just letting go. This happens in the smooth muscle that wraps around your smallest blood vessels, the arterioles and capillaries that do most of the actual work of delivering blood to your tissues. That muscle has been holding a slight contraction, the vascular equivalent of the twist in the hose, for as long as the noradrenaline kept arriving. When it stops arriving, the muscle doesn't need a new instruction to relax. It simply stops being told to stay contracted, and smooth muscle, left alone, drifts toward relaxation. The vessel widens, not because something pushed it open, but because the thing holding it closed let go. Now follow that release outward, to where you can actually feel it, your extremities, your fingers, your toes, the skin on your hands and face. These areas are packed with exactly the kind of small vessels we're talking about, arterioles and capillary beds that are extremely responsive to noradrenaline levels precisely because your body uses them as a kind of emergency reserve. When you're stressed or cold or under bright light triggering that low-grade alertness, These vessels are among the first to clamp down, redirecting blood toward your core and major organs away from your skin. It's an old survival mechanism. Keep blood near the organs that matter most. Let the extremities run a little cooler. Under constant light exposure, and especially under the blue heavy glare of screens, these peripheral vessels stay in a partially clamped state almost permanently, just enough that you'd never notice it as cold hands, but persistent enough that it's your default. The moment that noradrenaline signal drops, these are the vessels that respond fastest and most dramatically, because they had the most tension to release in the first place. And this is where the 3-minute window becomes important. This isn't an instant all-or-nothing flip. The relaxation builds, second by second, as noradrenaline levels in the surrounding tissue continue to drop and the smooth muscle continues to ease. Over the course of about 3 minutes, the capillary beds in your extremities go from their default, slightly clamped daytime state to a fully relaxed, expanded state. Wider vessels, lower resistance, and more blood volume flowing into the skin and tissues of your hands, feet, and face. This is the physical event behind that warmth you feel creeping into your fingers and toes when you've been lying in true darkness for a few minutes. It's not your imagination, and it's not just your body settling down in some vague sense. It's a measurable shift in blood volume, redirected outward, made possible by the release of a chemical brake that's been quietly engaged your entire waking life. But the story doesn't end with the smooth muscle simply releasing its grip. There's a second mechanism running in parallel, happening at an even smaller scale, inside the single-cell-thick lining of the blood vessels themselves, called the endothelium. Think of the endothelium as a kind of internal skin for every blood vessel in your body, a layer that's in direct contact with the blood flowing past it every second for your entire life. These cells aren't just a passive barrier. They're chemically active, constantly producing a molecule called nitric oxide, which acts as a powerful localized signal telling the smooth muscle around it to relax. Under normal daytime conditions, with the noradrenaline-driven tension we described earlier, endothelial nitric oxide production runs at a baseline level, present but modest, partially counteracted by the tension being held from outside the vessel. In total darkness, something changes inside these cells. As the broader nervous system signal shifts towards safety, the endothelium ramps up its own production of nitric oxide, not just maintaining its baseline output, but increasing it. And this matters because it means the vessel relaxation we've been describing isn't coming from just one direction. It's not only that the external tension, the noradrenaline-driven twist, is being released. It's that the vessel wall itself, from the inside, is actively pushing toward a wider, more open state, reinforcing and deepening the same relaxation that started with the drop-in, noradrenaline. This is why the effect 3 minutes in isn't subtle. You have two systems operating on two different scales, both converging on the same outcome: external tension releasing and internal chemistry actively promoting expansion. The vessel isn't just allowed to widen, it's being actively encouraged to. And all of it traces back to a single event: photons hitting a small population of cells in your retina, dropping to zero for long enough for your body to register it as the real thing. Now let's talk about heat, because heat is the part of this story you can actually feel without any special awareness at all. You don't need to monitor your blood pressure or track your heart rate to notice this one. You just need fingers and toes and a few minutes of darkness. Here's the physics behind it, and it's simpler than you'd think. Blood carries heat. That's its second job after carrying oxygen. Your blood is a circulating fluid, and like any circulating fluid, it moves thermal energy from wherever it's generated to wherever it's needed, or away from wherever it's not. Your core, your chest, your abdomen, the deep tissue around your major organs, generates a huge amount of metabolic heat constantly, just from the ordinary business of staying alive. Your extremities, by contrast, generate very little heat of their own. They're thin, they're surface heavy, and they lose heat to the environment quickly. Left alone, your hands and feet would run cold, relative to your core, all day, every day. Under normal conditions, the slightly clamped, noradrenaline-tensed conditions we've been describing, your body manages this by restricting blood flow to the extremities. Less blood reaching your fingers and toes means less heat being delivered there, which means they run a little cooler, a little more often than you'd probably notice unless someone pointed it out. This isn't a malfunction. It's a deliberate allocation. Your body is choosing to keep more blood and more heat circulating near your core and your major organs, and less reaching the periphery, because under at least mild sympathetic tension, the periphery is treated as expendable. Now remove the light. The noradrenaline signal drops. The smooth muscle around your peripheral vessels relaxes. The endothelium ramps up nitric oxide production. Everything we've already traced. And the immediate physical consequence of all that vessel widening is that the restriction on blood flow to your extremities lifts. More blood can now flow to your hands, feet, and skin than was flowing a few minutes earlier. And that blood is carrying core-generated heat with it. This is the heat dump. It's not your body producing extra warmth somewhere. It's not a new source of heat at all. It's a redistribution. Heat that was already being generated in your core, previously held back from your extremities by vascular tension, suddenly being allowed to flow outward, into your hands and feet, because the pipes carrying it there have widened. You feel warmth spreading into your fingers and toes, not because your body just made more heat, but because it just stopped holding heat back from the places that were quietly running cold the whole time. And this is exactly why it takes about 3 minutes to feel. It's not instantaneous, because it's not a switch, it's a gradual widening, building second by second as the vessels continue to relax. And the warmth you feel is the cumulative result of that gradual process finally becoming noticeable. By the time you feel it, the vascular shift has already been underway for a while. The warmth in your fingers is the lagging indicator of something that started in your retina. Now, here's where the story moves from interesting to genuinely important for your long-term health, because the same widening that produces that warmth is also doing something to the inside of your blood vessels that has nothing to do with temperature at all. Every time blood moves through a vessel, it exerts a kind of drag on the vessel's inner lining, a frictional force called shear stress, created by the fluid moving across the surface. Think about the difference between water flowing gently through a wide riverbed versus the same volume of water forced through a narrow channel. In the narrow channel, the water moves faster and presses against the banks with more force. Your blood vessels work the same way. A narrower vessel means the same volume of blood has to move faster to get through, and that faster movement means more friction against the delicate single-cell lining, the endothelium that we talked about earlier. Under the slightly constricted conditions your vessels sit in for most of your waking life, this friction is happening constantly, at a low level, every single time your heart beats. It's not dramatic, it's not something you'd ever feel, but it's relentless, and over years and decades, that relentless low-grade friction is part of what gradually wears down the endothelial lining, contributing, slowly, to the kind of vascular wear that underlies a lot of long-term cardiovascular decline. When your vessels widen during those 3 minutes of darkness, the math reverses. The same volume of blood moving through a wider channel slows down. And slower moving blood through a wider vessel means less friction against the lining, less shear stress, full stop. For those few minutes, the constant low-grade wear on your endothelium eases off. And here's the part that matters most. The endothelium isn't just a passive surface taking damage. It's a living layer of cells, capable of repair, but only when conditions allow it. A brief reduction in shear stress gives those cells a window, a brief reprieve from the mechanical load they're normally under, in which the ordinary maintenance and repair processes these cells run can catch up just slightly. It's not a dramatic transformation. It's a small, repeated opportunity, the kind of thing that means very little on any single night, but accumulates into significance over months and years of being given that opportunity regularly. While all of this is happening, the widening, the heat redistribution, the easing of friction, there's a fourth system quietly recalibrating in the background, and it's one that affects something you've definitely heard of: your heart rate. Scattered through the walls of some of your major blood vessels, particularly around your neck and the base of your heart, are clusters of nerve endings called baroreceptors. Their job is to continuously monitor blood pressure, moment to moment, and report back to your brainstem so it can make tiny, constant adjustments to your heart rate and vessel tension to keep your blood pressure within a stable range. Think of them as a thermostat for pressure, always sensing, always adjusting, mostly invisible. Under the mild vascular tension that's your normal daytime baseline, these receptors are operating against a slightly elevated pressure backdrop. Not high blood pressure in any clinical sense, just the ordinary, slightly elevated baseline that comes with vessels that are slightly more constricted than they need to be. The baroreceptors adjust to this as their normal, and your heart rate settles into a baseline that reflects it. When your vessels widen during those 3 minutes, overall resistance in your circulatory system drops, and blood pressure eases slightly along with it. The baroreceptors detect this drop, and in response, your brainstem reduces the signals that have been keeping your heart rate at its slightly elevated daytime baseline. Your heart doesn't need to work as hard to push blood through wider, lower resistance vessels, so the signals telling it to maintain its current pace ease off. The result is a measurable drop in heart rate, and often a smoothing out of small irregularities and erratic beats that tend to crop up under sustained low-grade tension. This is your baroreceptors recalibrating to a new lower pressure normal, even if that new normal only lasts for as long as the darkness does. And running underneath every part of this, the vessel widening, the heat redistribution, the reduced friction, the recalibrated heart rate is one more process, and it's the one most people think they already understand, but don't. You've heard of melatonin. You know it as the sleep hormone, something your body makes at night that helps you fall asleep. That's true. But it's only the headline, and it's the part of the story that happens hours later. What almost nobody talks about is what melatonin's precursor molecules are doing in the first few minutes after light disappears. Not at bedtime, but right now in this 3-minute window, regardless of what time of day it is. The same biochemical pathway that eventually produces melatonin for sleep begins producing intermediate molecules almost immediately when light input drops to zero. These molecules aren't waiting for nightfall, and they're not just sedative signals preparing your brain for sleep. They're potent antioxidants, molecules that actively neutralize a particular kind of cellular byproduct, including some of the byproducts generated by the shear stress we talked about earlier. So in the same window where your vessels are widening and friction is dropping, your body is also releasing a chemical that helps clean up the residue of friction that's already occurred. Two processes, same timeline, same 3 minutes, working in the same direction, and one of them is happening because of a hormone most people have only ever associated with falling asleep at 11 p.m. So here's what all of this adds up to. Forceps systems, your peripheral blood vessels, the lining of those vessels, your pressure-sensing nerves, and your hormonal chemistry all shift in the same direction at the same time, triggered by the same single event. The complete absence of light, sustained for about 3 minutes while you're awake. And the protocol for accessing this is almost embarrassingly simple. You don't need a sleep schedule. You don't need to be tired. You don't need any equipment beyond what you probably already own. Find a space that can go completely dark, a closet, a bathroom with the door shut and the lights off, or just a sleep mask in any room. Sit down. Close your eyes if you're not already wearing a mask. And stay there, doing nothing, for 3 minutes. That's it. That's the entire intervention. No breathing pattern to follow, no posture to maintain, no app to track it. Your nervous system, your blood vessels, and your hormonal chemistry already know exactly what to do. They've known for as long as humans have existed. The only thing required of you is to stop interrupting them. For 3 minutes, between meetings, before bed, in the middle of a stressful afternoon, give your vascular system the one input it's been missing your entire modern life. Nothing. No light at all. And let it do, briefly, what it was built to do.